At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Welcome back to Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor, your one-stop shop when it comes to animation news and commentary. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and Mr. Taylor, whose writings on the industry you can regularly read over on The Wrap, and whose musings on the Mission Impossible movies you can listen to on Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast. Well, Drew and I are recording this week's episode on Monday, March 10th. Okay. So, Drew, you and I recorded last week's show, in fact, a week ago today, because we wanted to talk about what had won the Academy Awards, Flow and, what is it, In the Shadow of the Cypress. And kind of killed me that, of course, we recorded in the morning, and in the afternoon, we then had that huge bit of news about Tiana.
Yes, of course. That's just our luck, isn't it, Jim?
There we go. So, all right. So this is actually two stories, right? That we got news that this limited series, which, by the way, got announced, Investor Day, Disney Investor Day.
2020.
Yeah, December of 2020.
Yep.
And so 5 years in the works. And the project gets shut down. And we also learned that Walt Disney Animation Studios will no longer be producing long-form content of any kind for that subscription streaming service. Is that what you're hearing as well?
That is what I am hearing. And, this is not a huge surprise. I think that obviously there was supposed to be another show after Win or Lose and Dream Productions at Pixar. That was canceled. So, yeah, I think this is just the long form part of it is that they have limited resources. They have limited amounts of production, and that short form does really, really well. I think we talked about this last time about how the Sing short thriller was like one of the top 5, watched things on Netflix for the fourth quarter of last year or the second half of last year, whatever it was. So yeah, it's just easier to do those shorter things. And, I have a lot of questions about how it'll impact the Vancouver or the Canadian studio. But yeah.
Very valid questions. Some very talented people who've worked very hard. And in fact, that's the other thing from what I've been hearing from friends at Disney. There was hope that in much the same way as, for example, February of last year, we learned that the Moana limited series, which, by the way, got originally announced on the same Investors Day thing back in December of 2020, that mutated into a film that got released to theaters that made, $1.05 billion or $50 million last year. So that story had a happy ending, and I guess there was an attempt made to sort of right the ship and with a notion. Well, remember, what was it? October of 2023, we had Joyce Sherry brought in as the brand new lead writer and director of the Tiana limited series. And that was, almost 3 years plus into production? So they tried, right? They legitimately tried to turn this around, right?
They did, and they ultimately ended up with a television special, which is what it will be. One that will now be directed in part by our buddy Steven Anderson, who wrote the Disney In Between Years book recently and is a generally wonderful guy. He directed, Meet the Robinsons, and he's just the best. We love Steven. He did the Winnie the Pooh movie with Don Hall, which is we do great.
But all right, one story though there that evidently when we finally got to this point that okay, 5 years of work, but we're going to get a special out of it. The story that I'm hearing is, okay, which holiday do you want? because we have so much material. We could give you an Easter special. We could give a Halloween special. We could give you a Christmas special. Which one do you want?
Yes, I have heard it is not a Christmas special.
Okay.
It is just a special. I've also heard that the show was more of its own story and also aligned with Tiana's Bayou Adventure, which is interesting. And this new special is going to more closely align with The Princess and the Frog.
Okay.
So
because that is one note that I also heard as well, that the very thing that kind of tripped up the original Princess and the Frog back in 2009, what with Tiana being the first African-American Disney princess. And remember, that was a film when they originally announced that the lead character was Maddie, who was the maid of, I'm blanking the name of the character there, but the world kind of lost its mind. No, did we say she's a maid? No, she wants to have her own restaurant. She's working. And that was the thing, that trying to come up with a story for Tiana when she was so placed on a pedestal, it was just difficult to pull off. And 5 years of trying to come up with something that worked for this character, and at the same time somehow dovetailed into the redo of Splash Mountain. And it just, I just feel bad to the folks. They worked really hard, and more to the point, very much looking forward to what Steven and the team delivers with this holiday special, because, man, they went down a lot of roads.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. And again, that's just one story for this week, because quite the news week for animation, and which we'll get to in a second. But first, have to acknowledge our sponsors, actually. And first is the DVC rental store. And if you're already planning your next trip to Walt Disney World, you can save some serious money by renting DVC points through the DVC rental store. Imagine staying at a deluxe resort for the fraction of the cost. Total game changer. On the other hand, if you already own or thinking of joining the Disney Vacation Club, you might want to check out the DVC resale market. They are the leaders in secondary market with over 70,000 satisfied members. That's crazy. And whether you're looking to buy or rent your DVC points, they make the process seamless. Okay, Drew, now to the news. And at this point in the show, we always talk about the box office news. And let's be honest, at this point in the animation world, all anyone is talking about is Ni-Za 2, which I think we talked about on last week's show, was about to blow through the $2 billion barrier. And that's $2 billion worth of tickets just sold in China.
Yes, I saw today that the European market has been acquired too. So if anyone is listening in Europe, you will have your chance to see Ni-Za 2 shortly.
Cool,
yeah.
Cool. Have you managed yet to get out to see it? Or
I still have not. No,
Okay.
It's very hard, but have you? Did you see it?
I am. It's my plan. This is my birthday week, folks. I turned 66, which, by the way, is 1 year older than Walt Disney.
You did it, Jim. You did it.
I did it. I beat Walt. Okay, there we go. But yeah, I want this to be my birthday treat. Now, mind you, again, you got to have 2 hours plus to actually go to the theater to see this thing. But again, what is it? $2 billion. $32 million, and the 32 is what they've done in North America and secondary markets up until this point. And I just want to stress here that there are only 7 films in all of Hollywood history that have ever sold more than $2 billion worth of tickets worldwide. And these are the original Avatar from 2009, that's $2.9 billion. Avengers Endgame, 2019, that's $2.7 billion. Then we have the Avatar sequel, The Way of Water from 2022. That was $2.3 billion. And then we have another James Cameron film, Titanic from 97. That was $2.2 billion. And then rapidly descending, Star Wars, The Force Awakens. That's $2.068 billion. Avengers Infinity War, that's $2.048 billion. And finally, as of today, Niza 2 is $2,048,000,000. So what is it? The thinking is that Niza 2 is definitely going to blow by Infinity War and The Force Awakens. I mean, just the European market alone will do that. And I guess what's interesting here is that how far up the list do you think this thing is going to move? Do you think it has a chance of achieving Titanic or Way of Water numbers?
I mean, it has made $2 billion in like an insane amount of time. All of those other movies took months and months and months to reach that threshold. So yeah, I'm just watching this thing and getting out my popcorn and just seeing how far it's going to climb, because it's pretty incredible what this has done. And
it is. But to circle back to again that rarefied list of films that have earned over $2 billion. The top 6 films on that list were either produced by Disney Studio or became part of Disney's film library with the Fox acquisition in March of 2019. So you got to assume Disney's looking over its shoulder and going, "Urgh." But all right. But again, Disney, big company. In fact, 233,000 employees around the globe were working for Disney at the end of 2024, and there's 200 less this week because of the recent layoffs at ABC. And look, I want to share something. Did you see what Dave Brooksma put out on social media earlier this week?
No, I didn't. Tell me about it.
Okay. Well, for those of you who aren't familiar with Dave, he graduated from CalArts back in 1981 and was quickly hired by Walt Disney Animation Studios, rose through the ranks and became a supervising animator during Disney's second golden age of animation. And look, the character, the characters that Dave animated. I mean, he did Mrs. Potts and Chip in Beauty and the Beast. He did the Sultan in Aladdin. He did Pumbaa in The Lion King, Flit and Pocahontas, and not to mention my spirit animal, Hugo, from Hunchback of Notre Dame, also did Victor. And Dave left Disney in 2001 after nearly 20 years. And he was kind of vocal about it. He wasn't happy with the direction the company was taking at the time, and he's been a Disney critic for a long time. But this past week, Brooksma took to social media to talk about a recent interaction that he'd had with the mouse. And he starts off the post by saying, "I know I have made a numerous accusatory remarks about Disney management in my latter years at Disney feature animation, and rightly so. But that was long ago, and to be fair, I feel like I have to note when things are well-handed as well." And he goes on to say, case in point, "I lost nearly everything I had when my home burned to the ground during the Eaton Canyon fire back in January of 2025. And yet Disney replaced all of the service awards that I earned while helping create characters on the modern classic Disney animated features. And not only that, but I understand they are working on creating a new set of the maquettes of my characters to replace the ones I also lost in the tragedy." And I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty darn special. And I'm thankful to all those involved for making these things happen. And it made my day when the awards arrived via the United States Postal System today. So, thank you. And I have to say, it's decent of Disney to do something like this, to go out of their way to replace service awards and maquettes for somebody who hasn't worked for the company for nearly a quarter of a century at this point. And getting something like that back, especially when you've lost nearly everything in your life, it helps restore a teeny bit of yourself, that sense of normalcy. And I think this is a really nice gesture on Disney's part. And by the way, I know we do this every show, but I want to remind you that the people are still dealing with the after effects of the Palisades and the Eaton fires. And if you're in a position to give, Mr. Taylor and I would really appreciate it if you could make a contribution to the American Red Cross, which will then help the tens of thousands of people who were displaced and are still trying to find their way back. And speaking of back, we'll be back with more show in a moment. But first, this.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
I was never really a runner. The way I see running is a gift, especially when you have stage 4 cancer. I'm Anne. I'm running the Boston Marathon, presented by Bank of America. I run for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute to give people like me a chance to thrive in life, even with cancer.
Join Bank of America in helping Anne's cause. Give if you can at BofA.com/supportAnne. What would you like the power to do? References to charitable organizations is not an endorsement by Bank of America Corporation. Copyright 2025.
Uh-oh. The last cookie.
You can get a new box of cookies in as fast as an hour with Walmart Express Delivery.
Are you my guilty self-conscience?
No, I'm the voice offering you promo code EXPRESS for free delivery on your first order.
Hey, who ate my cookies?
You mean, these cookies?
Order now. Welcome to your Walmart. Promotion valid for first express delivery order. $50 minimum subject to availability. Restrictions apply.
And we're back. Of course, we were just talking a moment ago about the wildfires in California. And Drew, you have something to mention about something that can directly affect some of the artists and animators who were impacted by this, right?
Yes, there is something that ASIFA is doing called Animade, and it is an unprecedented fundraising campaign in support of our colleagues in the animation industry who have lost so much in the recent fires. And go onto the website, asifa-hollywood.org. You can donate, and you can also bid on some pretty cool items. I just saw Josh Cooley put up a signed copy of the art of Transformers 1, and I was talking to Amy Astley last week about what they're contributing. So there are going to be some really cool items on there, and you can also just donate away, and it'll help a lot of people who were affected by these fires. Jim and I know so many who are in the industry who were impacted by this. So many people in Altadena and Pasadena are from the animation community, and it would mean a lot. So check that out, Animade, on the ASIFA website.
Okay, and speaking of auctions, this is a touch more mercenary, but even so, very cool. Van Eaton Galleries and Auction, they have this huge event coming up, 2-day-long affair where 950 items from the estate of animation master Bob Clampett are going to be sold off. And again, we try to talk up events out in LA. We had, to be honest, on this show, we try to talk up events where you can go see Drew Taylor. And by the way, anything coming up we want to mention? I mean, Amphibia.
Yes, we have some Amphibia events in April. So I think the first one is on April 2nd at the Grove.
Okay.
So I think tickets are on sale for that now. So, yeah, you can go get that. Yep.
Okay. Well, now, speaking of tickets being on sale, I mean, if you want to actually just go see the art out ahead of this auction, now through March 20th, you can actually go to the physical Van Eaton Galleries, which are located at 160 Ventura Boulevard in Studio City. And by the way, the gallery space is open Tuesday to Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6. But if you want to do something extra cool, there is going to be a tribute to Bob Clampett event held. This is on Sunday, March 16th, and will be hosted by noted author and animation historian Jerry Beck, and will feature appearances by, well, friend of the show, a Disney legend, Floyd Norman, likewise animator and story artist Mark Clauser. But again, that's also going to be held at the Van Eaton Gallery and auction spaces. But again, you're going to need a ticket for that, like Drew's thing at the Grove. And if you can't make it, if you like me, you live in the woods of New Hampshire, there is an amazing catalog, which, by the way, you can look at digitally on the Van Eaton site. But Drew, this thing is 350 pages long, and just when you think about what Bob Clampett worked on, I mean, the early Looney Tunes shorts, or Time for Beanie and Beanie and Cecil. Just again, this is something maybe you want to grab a copy of, folks. Speaking of which, so Time for Beanie, that started out as a live TV show done with puppets, and eventually got reinvented in the 60s as Beanie and Cecil, an animated series. And I bring that up because Rick and Morty, that Adult Swim smash, just got last year reinvented as an anime series. Now, well, all right, to be clear here, the anime version of Rick and Morty actually started out as a sporadic set of shorts that debut. How's this for timing, Drew? You walk this out to the world in March of 2020, just as the pandemic's happening. And then we get, I guess they did a total of 5 shorts between there and November of 2021. But these were so well received that Adult Swim decided to greenlight 10 full-size episodes of the show done in a similar style. And Rick and Morty, the anime, debuted on Adult Swim in mid-August of last year, 2024. And by the time it finishes running in late October of last year, our Rick and Morty fans were already, where's the DVD? When's the Blu-ray? And Warner Brothers Discovery announced that that's hitting store shelves on April 29th. But as we were just pre-gaming today's show, Drew, you have news about something else that's showing up on is it Blu-ray, DVD, or is this one it's going to be?
No, this is the streaming date for Mufasa the Lion King, which is still in the top 10 theatrically right now. It was number 8 over the weekend, Jim. So this is pretty unprecedented. It is going to be on Disney Plus on March 26th. So that is exciting. We heard Dana Walden say last week, late March. So now March 26th will be the date. Yeah.
Okay. Well, now, interesting you bring up Disney Plus, because did you see this news about what Jon Favreau is putting together for the subscription streaming service, the Oswald Project?
Yeah, it seems very odd. It's a live-action animation hybrid about Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. And, yeah, when I was at Disney, you know, they showed us these episodes, these kind of test episodes for an updated Oswald cartoon that was made, I think, by Consumer Products. So they've been wanting to do something with Oswald for a long time. Obviously, there was the Epic Mickey game that featured Oswald, which was recently re-released. But, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what this thing is.
Well, but what's interesting to me is I don't know if you saw the news over this weekend with the South-Southwest thing, when they brought the big guns out to talk about storytelling in the parks and how the studios and that sort of thing are working together. But they mentioned that, what is it? The Favreau Star Wars movie, The Mandalorian and Grogu, the reimagining of Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run, which is built around the Mandalorian Grogu. day and date. I mean, just the notion of when that opens in theaters, you can go to the park and hang out with those two characters. And
well, they did do that for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 as well, if you'll recall. That opened the same day as the
this is true. This is
Mission Breakout. But yeah, that was an interesting panel. It's nothing like seeing Robert Downey Jr. bomb in front of an audience to really make your heart swell. If there was ever an indication that was not the D23 audience, him coming out and absolutely just tanking, pretty funny. Yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, I mean, it's just, for me, what's interesting is that the fact that Favreau can pretty much do whatever he wants at Disney. And so, as I understand it, he felt that Disney hadn't done right by Oswald. He was going to step into that space. And again, when you look at the money that this guy has made for the company so far, it's like, absolutely, John, whatever you want to do.
Listen, if anybody can crack it, it'll probably be him. But yeah.
Here's hoping. But again, we were just talking about Disney being decent with what they did with Dave Brooksma, but at the same time, it's important to understand here that it's always a mistake to talk about Disney as a monolith, because the hard reality, and you know this better than anyone, Drew, that Disney is really like 30 little companies that share the same name, that do not have agendas that jibe. And I for example, I wanted to talk about this labor contract news that came over the past week with the production.
What's very funny about this too, Jim, is that
what?
I was literally at the studio earlier that day for a Moana 2 home video press event.
Ooh.
And there was no talk about this ratification or anything going on inside the studio. So I got back and looked and said, oh my God, I was just there. I mean, there was not, it was not like a big climactic end to the protest. It was just a kind of resolution. And but you want to talk about what that was?
Well, what's important here is that, production managers, production supervisors, and production coordinators, who, by the way, are the lowest paid individuals at Disney Animation Studios, and do, again, a huge amount of the work to get these films out the door. They joined the union like 18 months ago, 16 months ago. And only now managed to get their first contract, and the way it was explained to me is this really got slow walked because they were concerned about what might happen. Is that what you heard? Or?
I haven't heard any. I mean, I don't really cover labor that much, but I mean, anything to get them a better deal. I think that the Animation Guild does not protect these people like they should, and I am very happy that they are actually now being ratified by ASIFA, which is the largest sort of guild organization in town. Because we've talked about everything from DGA protections not being there for animation directors to everything else. So I think this is a great step in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, what it took to first get them in the guild, and then again to get this contract, and it just again, and again, I don't mean, especially on the heels of telling that nice Dave Brooksma story at the front of the show, but Disney sometimes can be petty and mean, and which brings us to Full Steam Ahead: The Life and Art of Ward Kimball. Do you remember when this book first got announced back in the 2010s?
No, I don't remember that far back.
All right. Amidi, the talented guy who's been running the show over Cartoon Brew, another great animation news site. He had been working on this biography of Ward Kimball and interviewed family, his contemporaries, had it all set to go at Chronicle Books. But the thing of it is, and I don't need to tell you this, Drew, that there were a lot of stories associated with Ward that are not exactly family friendly. He was a colorful guy, all right, and was really out there. But the thing of it is, the subtitle of this book was The Life and the Art of Ward Kimball. And they had announced that it would be published, I want to say, in the fall of 2012. And it went to Disney Legal. And basically, the story as it was explained to me, Drew, was that Disney Legal basically went to Chronicle and said, we won't give you our Ward Kimball art for this book unless you take out these stories. They wanted a sanitized version of Ward Kimball's life, and to give Hamid credit, he wasn't willing to back down, and the book got postponed for a while, and then it finally got canceled in the spring of 2012, and for a time, it was going to self-publish, but now we've just learned that a revamped version of this book with a brand new title, If It Ain't Fun, to Hell With It, Ward Kimball's Adventures in Disney, Jazz, Trains, and the Avant-Garde. That's coming out in 2026. So only took another 14 years, but evidently Hamid waded back into the book and rewrote it in such a way that it wouldn't need so much of the art to actually tell the Ward Kimball story.
Wow.
And as somebody who I've been waiting this book forever because I'm a huge fan of Ward Kimball's career, if only for the weirder corners of it. I mean, I think you and I have talked about the UFO stories.
Yes, I would love to. I would love to write that as a entire book or something.
No, totally. Yeah. In fact, it's so ironic that we've got that documentary that's debuting right now. Where they've got all these government officials talking about how UFOs are real, and the story that I heard is that it was It was Werner von Braun, right, who actually reached out on the Pentagon's behalf to Disney Studios. And the notion was, we need you guys to make the television program that we're going to have air on all three networks on the night that we decide to tell the American public that UFOs are real.
Yes.
And
this was on the heels, Jim, you should say, of the space... the trilogy of space episodes that he had made for Disneyland, I think was the show at the time, because this was like 55-ish. Yeah.
There we go. The man in space stuff. And to hear Ward tell the story, evidently, I mean, he was getting ready to go to the airport, to get on a plane, to go to the Pentagon, where they were going to show him. I mean, for example, they evidently have hundreds of hours of footage that were taken from the nose cone of bombers during World War II of that. Well, the Foo Fighters.
Yeah.
And this was the thing. And Ward was like, I can't wait. I'll go to the Pentagon. They're going to show me the footage. And evidently, as he was getting ready to go to the airport, it's like, they've had second thoughts. The project's been tabled. And so I'm so hoping that if
it's a lovely story, Jim, because it didn't actually happen. You know, he didn't go to the Pentagon, and the only person that knew about it is the one telling the story.
There we go.
But he would tour like UFO conventions, especially later in his life, pretty frequently telling this story. So it's interesting. Yeah.
No. Cannot wait for this book. And by the way, if you want to keep tabs on it, Hamid has set up a website. In fact, let me give you the address for that. That's amidi.com. But yeah, he'll have a newsletter that'll keep folks up to speed on the Ward Kimball book. And again, as somebody who's been waiting for this thing forever, cannot wait to see this book. And speaking of books, when we get back from this ad break, we're going to shine a spotlight on a terrific new memoir that looks back at the late 80s and the early 90s when we were just talking about the second golden age of Disney animation, but in parallel to that was the rise of CG, and one of the guys who was right in the middle of that was Bill Croyer. But we'll talk about his book in a moment. But first, this.
Hey, it's Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast here to tell you about Michelob Ultra Courtside. It's getting fans closer to the NBA with a chance to win prizes like courtside seats, a trip to All-Star Weekend, and much more. Check it out at MichelobUltra.com/courtside. Michelob Ultra Superior Access, Courtside 24-25 sweepstakes, no purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 and up. Begins on October 1st, 2024, ends July 1st, 2025. Multiple entry periods. Visit MichelobUltra.com/courtside for free entry deadlines, and official rules. Message and data rates may apply. Void where prohibited.
And we're back. Look, folks, if you listen to Fine Tuning, you know we love animation-related books here. And not just because Drew has written a bunch of them. And want to remind you that there's the art of Disney Pixar Onward. There's the art and making of Ultraman Rising, which came out in January of this year.
January, yeah. And you can also pre-order the soundtrack to Ultraman Rising, which has brand new liner notes written by me that has interviews with Shannon. And,
that's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and the composer. So, yeah, check that out too.
Cool. And of course, we have The Art of Amphibia, which hits store shelves later this month, March 25th, which Drew wrote in collaboration with Matt Braley. And want to remind you about the event at the Grove that's happening April 2nd. Is that right?
April 2nd. Yes, I think.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, but again, Drew and I are not just fans of making of books. We also love memoirs and history books, and when the people who actually had a hand in forging the modern animation industry take a look back at their careers. And there's a great new book that to add to that pile, and that is Bill Croyer's Mr. In Between: My Life in the Middle of the Animation Revolution. Hit store shelves tail end of last month, February 28th to be exact. It's 274-page book from CRC Press. Drew, this one's fascinating for a lot of reasons. I mean, Croyer takes you all the way back to Disney Animation Studio in the 1970s. By the way, he was hired at Disney initially as part of the Crunch Time team on Pete's Dragon.
Oh, wow.
Back when it's like, oh, by the way, we want 3 times as much footage of this character in the movie and make the same release date. Is that going to be a problem? And what's cool is that back when Bill first came on board at Disney, if you were a younger animator and wanted to study one of Disney's classic animated films, you could, and this is a great bit from Mr. In Between, said you could rent a 16mm projector from the studio. They did that in that day. And then you could borrow one of Disney's feature films and then project it on a bedsheet in your backyard. And because this is before there's video, this was, well, the only way for us animation addicts to study those films. And he talks about how if a bomb had dropped on one of these backyard parties, the history of modern animation would have been changed because he had most of Disney and Pixar's future directors out there sitting on his lawn. But sometimes folks like Bill, who again came in from CalArts, they'd actually do screenings on the lot. And he tells a story about Walton Favreau and the Black Cauldron's producer, Joe Hale. They invite the freshman class of CalArts to the Disney lot to have a sneak preview of the Black Cauldron. And so after the screening, Drew, Roy and Joe, they stepped to the front and they asked the students there what they thought of the film. And there's this long silence. And finally, one hand goes up at the back of the room, and it's this young student by the name of Ralph Eggleston. And Ralph is blunt. What he says is, why does the film sucks so much? And there's a stunned silence, and Roy and Joe walk out of the room, and then CalArts students are never invited to studio screenings again. But the interesting thing, there's a sequel to this story. Years later, Ralph Eggleston, who by now is an Oscar winner and a famous production designer on some of Pixar's biggest movies, he's attending an awards dinner and winds up being sat at the VIP table with Roy Disney. And so, he turns to him and asks Roy cautiously, do you remember me? And Walt's nephew, initially not sure, so Ralph reminds him that I was the Cal Arts student who spoke up at the screening and said that the Black Cauldron sucked. And so Roy pauses for a moment and he says, yes, I remember you. And you were not wrong. So, I just love that.
Amazing.
There we go.
Oh, man.
By the way, interesting month for Black Cauldron fans, all 5 of you. Neil O'Brien's After Disney, Toil, Trouble, and the Transformation of America's Favorite Media Company hit store shelves last week, March 4th. Also takes a close look at that animated feature. And what I learned from the O'Brien book, Drew, and we should bring this guy on the show. I mean, he talks about, I want to say it was right after the 5th book in the Chronicles of Prydain. Is that how we pronounce it?
I have no. I've heard it pronounced a number of ways. So let's just go with that. Yeah, sure.
Okay. So 5th book is published in 1968. Mind you, it would win a Caldecott Award or a Newbery the following year. I mean, it was highly thought of. And this is when Disney first kicks the tires on, do we want to acquire this? And they pass. It's not till 3 years later in 71 that they finally, all right, we'll get the film rights. And then it took another 14 years before the Black Cauldron finally reached the screens. But again, back to the Croyer book. Mystery Between doesn't just shine a spotlight on the 1970s and 80s. It also takes us right up to Hollywood of today, and I'm not going to lie, an especially heartbreaking time for animation professionals. This is, and again, quoting from the book, fall of 2019, which is when Ralph Eggleston called us. And when Bill says us, he's talking about himself and his wife, Susan, another animation professional. Anyway, Ralph calls us with terrible news. He had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And Ralph had remained a single guy and lived alone. And although Eggleston had many good friends, he sometimes felt reluctant to impose on them. And Sue would not listen to Ralph's reservations. We as a couple began to make frequent trips up to the Bay Area to help Eggleston with anything he needed, from house upkeep to 24/7 care after his chemo sessions. And Pixar was very supportive. They connected Eggleston with the doctor who had personally treated Steve Jobs during his bout with pancreatic cancer. But unlike Jobs, Ralph actually listened to the expert's advice. And he was initially only given 3 months to live, but Eggleston endured many rounds of treatment that included experimental procedures, and after 3 months of survival, which placed Ralph in the top 4% of survivors for pancreatic cancer, we all hoped that he had somehow miraculously escaped the fate that we feared. But then in 2022, the disease struck back with a vengeance, and when they finally took Ralph into the Marin Hospital ER, none of us knew that he would spend most of his remaining time in the hospital. And when word got out that Eggleston had entered this critical phase, Sue and I were deluged with calls asking if it would be possible to see Ralph. His friends down in Los Angeles were ready to drop everything and drive or fly up to the Bay Area on a moment's notice if they could visit. And everyone from Pixar's CEO down to guys who worked in the mailroom asked to visit. And sadly, we lost Ralph in August of 2022 at the age of 56. And I bring up this story because these days, people don't like to say nice things about John Lasseter. He's basically been given the C.V. Wood treatment, which means much like Disneyland's very first vice president and general manager, Lasseter has been erased from Disney corporate history. But in reading this book, I got told a tale about Eggleston's battle with pancreatic cancer. And Bill revealed that in the midst of what Lasseter was going through when Disney showed him the door. And remember, I want to stress here that Jon's behavior prior to Disney showing him at the door, it wasn't great. Some people made some very valid complaints about Jon's behavior. But as Disney was forcing him out of Pixar, Jon and his wife, Nancy, still found time to take care of my dear friend, Ralph Eggleston, in his last months. Quietly, privately, Jon and Nancy would call or come to Ralph's house or bring dinner. And Sue, again, Sue is Bill Croy's wife, and I were so touched to see these gestures of love and loyalty. And I'm just going to put this out there. There's a quote from John Wooden that a true test of a man's character is what he does when nobody is watching. And again, not thrilled with the way John Lasseter treated female employees at that studio, but I like this story. And I in fact, I like a lot of this book. Again, Bill Croyer's memoir, Mr. In Between, My Life in the Middle of the Animation Revolution. And if you want to learn more about that stretch when the industry transitioned out of hand-drawn, and it's so funny. Remember when it used to be called traditional animation, Drew?
Yes.
And it was the folks who worked on the computer said, no, it's hand-drawn. But yeah, but you need to get a copy yourself from this book from CRC Press. And by the way, Drew, the Venn diagram of your two podcasts connected with this book because Bill shares a story about Brad Bird, how when the director of The Incredibles and Ratatouille was working on Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, he actually asked Paul Hirsch, who was editing that movie, to remove a single frame from the scene where the villain, you know that multi-story parking garage thing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
The moment where the villain falls 30 feet onto the hood of a car, Brad asked Paul to remove a single frame. And Paul told Brad he had never, in all of his time as an editor, had a director ask to remove a single frame of film. But Brad explained to her that he only knew to do this because he had studied animation with Disney legend Eric Larson, who had this giant moviola in his office and would literally bring students in and run the animation that they had just done. And Eric would say, okay, you need to extend this scene by 2 frames, or you need to take out a single frame for this to be more effective. And that's how Brad knew that cutting 1 frame out of a guy falling 30 feet onto the hood of a car was going to enhance that movie in the moment in the movie, because the human eye can actually register changes that are that subtle.
Well, if you listen to Light the Fuse, you'll hear more stories about that, including the fact that going forward, Paul Hirsch had never looked at a movie frame by frame. He would edit frame by frame for the rest of his career after Ghost Protocol because of that interaction with Brad Bird.
Oh,
so,
that is
there you
so
go.
Cool. All right. Well, again, I bring this up, folks, because, again, if you are not listening to Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast, which, by the way, Drew does with his equally talented co-host, Charles Hood, you are missing out on so many great stories that get down into the microscopic level of storytelling there. And, I have to ask, because we're coming up quick on it, are we headed to CinemaCon?
I don't know yet. I hope so. I can tell you that this week, Jim, we will have 2 episodes dedicated to the making of Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. So if you want all the details from Brad and Paul and everybody else involved in the movie, Tom, the whole gamut, Brian Burke, everybody, listen to those 2 episodes this week. I don't know what the timing is exactly. They'll both be out on Friday. So you can just gorge and learn all about Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. So, yes.
And by the way, folks, this is totally by coincidence. Drew did not know I was going to share
I did not know.
that Paul Hirsch. How cool. All right. Well, when you're done gorging on wonderful Light the Fuse, we do have a couple other podcasts here we might like you to check out. We have Disney Dish that I do with Len Testa. Likewise, we have the Epic Universal podcast, which I do with Eric Hersey, who is a very talented gentleman who produces a lot of the shows here. We have I Want That Too. That's our Disney merch podcast that I do with Eric's bride, Lauren. And let's see, what else? Brian Gunn and I really need to get a new Looking at Lucasfilm out the door. There's so much news is broken on that side of the street. Beyond that, also want to remind you folks about our the themed entertainment history podcast we host here. Manufacturing the Magic, which is produced by Noah and Shelley Valladolid. They've done a great job with that. And also want to remind you of our Patreon project, Disney Unpacked. In fact, just before Drew and I got started here tonight, I was working with Jim Schul on our next show, which is about how Disney has kept Snow White evergreen by keeping that character in the parks in many different ways. But anyway, as we close up shop this week, Mr. Taylor and I want to ask a favor of you. If you could head over to Apple Podcasts and rate and review, well, not just this show, but also Light the Fuse, that would be helpful. And social media-wise, Drew, where are we these days?
Mostly on X and Instagram. I don't know why I'm still on X, but I think it's worth sticking around for a little while longer, at least, at Drew Tailored, like a tailored shirt. And Jim, where can people find you?
Okay. Again, also on X. Likewise, Instagram as Jim Hill Media, and over on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. All right. As we head out the door here, again, want to thank Eric Hersey and David Gray for the wonderful job they do on the production side of things on this podcast. And I know we mentioned this earlier in the show, but again, folks out west are still dealing with the after effects of those wildfires. And Drew, you want to remind them about that the event?
Yes, Animade from ASIFA. So go on their website and check that out. You can donate. You can bid on things like Josh's copy of the art of Transformers 1. And you can help those in the animation industry that have been impacted by these devastating fires. So I really encourage people to do that and to keep an eye on it, because I know all the studios are going to be donating stuff. So yeah, keep an eye.
Can't wait. Okay. And of course, if you want to make a donation to the American Red Cross, that would be helpful too. Anyway, on behalf of Mr. Taylor, thanks again for listening to this week's Fine Tuning, and we will be back soon.